Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great honor for us to participate in this important event that the Universidad Quintana has organized so well in such difficult times. Thank you for the invitation. Let me introduce my colleague. This is Bárbara Rose Bangle Villavicencio, and I'm María Estela Estrada Cortés. We are going to talk about reflective practice in teacher educators in a distance BA program. And the contents of the talk are the educational context, some important data about the BA in ELT, English Language Teaching, lay, at the UMX, the role of reflective practice in our curriculum, the methodology used for this research, the results and analysis obtained, and finally, the implications for curriculum restructuring process. Well, first of all, this BA program was created in 2000. It was restructured 3 years after as a distance program, and it was reaccredited in 2020. The main aim of this program is to legitimize and professionalize currently in service English language teachers. The amount of terms of this program ranks between 7 to 12 semesters, depending on each student's decision. At the moment, we have 64 students and we are 21 teachers. A central part of the developing the competences needed to professionalize teachers is being able to reflect, as mentioned in the curriculum of lay. We are considering reflection as a process, something that becomes an integral part of each teacher, not as a final goal or product. And we are looking at both, how we reflect and we reflect on. As a process, we consider different models for reflection. Wallace, whose contribution for reflective education was outstanding for considering the former schemata as the initial stage of the education process, Gibbs cycle, Driscoll, and calls for a stage cycle of experiential learning that you can see in the diagram of this slide. And as to what we reflect on, we are looking at teacher identity, including the different roles played, students' roles, motivation, and other aspects of our teaching. We especially have considered Jay and Johnson's model that has 3 levels. These are descriptive level, where we ask ourselves, what is happening? Is this working and for whom? For whom is not? How do I know? Does this relate to any of my stated goals? And to what extent are they being met? The second level, comparative, considers alternative views of what is happening, considers what research can contribute to an understanding of the matter. It focuses on the way to improve what's not working. Finally, the critical level focuses on the implications of the matter when viewed from these alternative perspectives. This entails the deeper meaning of what is happening in terms of public democratic purposes of schooling. What this matter that I am observing reveals about the moral and political dimension of schooling.
As an introduction to why this study was important, I'd like to mention that there is one specific course given in the 3rd semester of lay that refers only to developing reflection, and it's called reflective teaching. Within that course, we were interested in finding what level of reflection, compared with the 3 levels of Jay and Johnson, the students would reach. And so we looked at the entries in their teaching journals and discovered that by the end of the semester, they had reached at least the second level, the comparison, but had not reached a critical thinking level about their actual teaching process. It's important to remember that the students in lay are in-service English teachers. This led us to wonder about the reflective level of the teachers in the course, those people who are teaching the student teachers. And so we developed this study to try and identify the reflective strategies that were used by the teaching staff, and also the types of reflective strategies that they fostered in their own students. This was done by using two separate questionnaires, which were delivered via email through Google Forms. One of them was a modified form of the English language teaching reflective inventory developed by Akbari and others in 2010, which is a list of about 29, in our modified version, 29 different reflective strategies. A second questionnaire, which mentioned specific reflective strategies that could be used by the teachers with their own students, was designed to find out what they actually asked their students to do. In these 29 statements, which were ranked on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being never and 5 being always or almost always, the statements are divided into 5 different levels: a practical, cognitive, learner, metacognitive, and critical level. Some of the things that you would find in the statements at a practical level refer to the actual reflective strategies that teachers use. For example, I keep a file with notes on my previous classes about what went well, what didn't. I talk to or I observe my colleagues, for example. Then at a cognitive level, we look at things like I read professional journals, I participate in workshops or conferences and other types of continuing professional development activities. At the learner level, we are looking at how the teacher relates to their learners. For example, I ask them about what their favorite activities were or how they prefer to learn. Then at a metacognitive level, as we would expect, it asks us to think about the process and to think about how we became a teacher, how my previous experiences and my own teachers have shaped the teacher that I am today. The final level, the critical level, refers to statements that relate my teaching practice to society, to the world today. So the role of discrimination, gender bias. I try and promote tolerance in my classrooms, for example, would be statements that you find at this level. If we look at a purely quantitative analysis of the results, the average score on this Likert scale of 1 to 5 are the following. At a practical level, this is what you actually do in your reflection strategies. The average score was a 3, right in the middle. There were 2 areas here that scored quite low. 2 of the 6 questions scored quite low. One of them was, I keep a file on my previous classes, and the other one was, I observe my colleagues. This is probably due to the fact that this is a distance program, and so the teachers in the program don't have the opportunity to be physically in the same space as the other teachers, which is why that option probably scored very low. At a cognitive level, the average score was 3.9. Most of the teachers read professional journals. Most of the teachers think about their class as and experiences in their class as possible topics for an action research project and things of the sort. At a learner level, most of the teachers talk to their learners, get to know them as people, and are quite in touch with them in spite of the fact that this is all distance and they don't actually see them in a classroom. At the metacognitive level, all of the teachers scored themselves above a 4 of all of the questions about thinking about how I became a teacher, thinking about how my previous experiences shape who I am today as a teacher? And at a critical level, although very few people said that they include topics outside those that are included in their course books, topics such as ageism, sexism, or poverty, they all did have quite a high level of ranking themselves in the importance of tolerance and creating a democratic atmosphere in the classroom, understanding the influence of gender and ethnic identity and how it shapes the climate in a classroom. I'd like to mention that on this first questionnaire, at the time there were 23 teachers and 13 teachers answered the questionnaire. The second questionnaire consisted of two parts. First of all, again on a Likert scale, teachers were asked to describe the types of activities they involve their students in which would lead to reflection, such as I asked my students to describe practice teaching experience and identify what went well and what went poorly. I asked my students to keep a journal. I asked my students to record their class and then observe themselves to comment on what went well, etc. I myself observe my students, or I specifically give my students different reflective strategies to put into practice. I inform my students of different events that are going to come up, such as conferences or congresses, continuing professional development events that they might want to participate in. In this area, the most common activities were to ask their students to reflect on a teaching session with written reflection. Some of them ask their students for small action research projects. They do talk to their students about specific reflective strategies and inform their students of continuing professional development events. About half of them asked their students to record themselves and describe what went well. So from this, it looks like the type of activities that they asked their students to do would again reach only the second level of J.N. Johnson's reflective practice description, which is where I can compare what I'm doing and see what's going wrong and perhaps find other ways to do it. But it does not reach the critical thinking level of the third level of J.N. Johnson. The second part of the questionnaire, on the first part of the questionnaire, those actions that were not fostered in their students as often were peer observation and student observation of students. Again, since this is a distance program, this might be an explanation of why this is not ranked as high as the other types of reflective strategies. Also, some of the teachers are involved in classes that do not involve a teaching practice aspect, and so peer observation or teacher observation of students probably is not an integral part of that course. Some of the courses, such as the English language learning courses, or the research seminars, or linguistics courses, would be examples of these that don't have an actual teaching practice element. But it was very interesting for us to note that so few teachers asked their students to keep a learning journal. The second part of the questionnaire asked teachers to fill in an open statement, such as what the greatest benefit from being reflective for me is, the best way to foster reflection in my students is, why I consider myself to be reflective and the reflective strategies that I put into practice are, etc. So this was the second part of the questionnaire. The second questionnaire, parts 1 and 2, were answered by 11 of the 23 teachers who at that moment were teaching in the lay program. All of the teachers answered that the greatest benefit from being reflective is to improve my teaching practice, which is probably what we expected them to say. As to the second question, the best way to foster reflection in my students, many teachers said sharing my personal experience, asking them to self-evaluate, encouraging them to think about their teaching experiences, but it was not specified how I get them to think about their teaching experiences. They considered themselves to be reflective because they do keep a reflective journal. 30% of the teachers who answered do keep a reflective journal. and because they are open to change. Also, they identified that they felt that they thought about and analyzed their teaching practice. So an example of reflection on action in this case. Most of them felt that they were considered to be reflective because they kept a journal, or they were able to reflect on their practice through feedback from students and professional conversations with colleagues. And many indicated that they would like to be more reflective and put into practice different reflective strategies, but they weren't exactly sure how to. Something that was a common element in the answers in this section was that time constraints and excess workload impeded being able to put into practice different reflective strategies.
Well, all in all, how can we interpret these results? They rank themselves quite high in the English language teaching reflection inventory in the metacognitive and critical areas, but not so high in the practical area. Teachers value being reflective highly and would like to do more in their own practice, recognizing that the constraints of time and the excess of work do not always allow them to do what they would like to. As for fostering reflection in their students, many simple yet effective ways of reflecting, such as journal keeping, are not taken advantage of. So it would seem that teachers know the importance of being reflective, but do not always do what is necessary to be reflective themselves, nor are they conscious of the need to foster reflective practice in their students. What does this mean to us as we are undergoing a restructuring process of the lay curriculum? Even though the competence of being reflective is mentioned both in the entrance qualifications and graduation qualifications, only 11 of the 45 courses currently considered in the curriculum make a specific mention of students being reflective or reflecting on the content of the course. If we hold reflection so highly, we need to make a more overt mention of it in the curriculum. More opportunities for collaborative work among teachers need to be encouraged, both to develop a higher, more critical level or reflectivity themselves, and to foster this in their students. In teaching, as in many areas of life, we know that example is the strongest way of teaching. Well, finally, we have included some references for you to look at if you consider them useful. And we thank you for your interest in this project and welcome your questions, comments, or feedback. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much.